Pythagorean is where I delve into, because I got interested for a minute about the Gnostics, but then I found out that it goes deeper and it's a lot older. It goes into the Pythagoras, the ideologies that they had for him, like
Go
in their
ahead, hit Pythagoras cult. Go
yeah,
ahead.
Well,
yeah.
the
That's exactly what I
Gnosticism,
was getting ready to say. Like he had legends on top of legends about how he was and how he was portrayed. Like it, they always talk about the Pythagorean equations and stuff, but people don't realize like he was actually thought of as like a mystical person with.
oh yeah, they were political. They had a
Mhm.
Pythagorean League, which I was just fascinated with. There's almost no information on it. Like I dug into it, find there's very few sources, but you had Pythagoras and he had his school, and we were talking about this before. They were very mystical about numbers. They thought this was like magic, and this was they were touching the mind of God. 2 + 2 = 4. My God. And 3 + 1 = 4 too. And some like the Pythagorean theorem there, that was secret, man. You only learned that after you'd been in the cult for like 20 years. But they had something called the Pythagorean League, where they called them clubs. That he encouraged people to start a Pythagorean club in their city, and then they would become politically active, and then they would take over things politically. So they had a whole network of cities that were run by Pythagorean governments, and they all answered to Pythagoras, or whoever was the leader of the cult at that time. It lasted for a little while. It finally, most of them were overthrown. I think mostly because probably the people didn't like having to be vegetarians and not eating beans and stuff like that, because they had all kinds of weird rules. But I know it's just fascinating, and it's something they never talk about much. But it's like, I think one of the first examples of a religious cult actually grabbing for political power. I mean, eventually Pythagoras and his followers were killed by an angry mob. I mean, people didn't like him for some reason. We don't have the whole story, but it seems to me if people are like, rioting about these guys, they probably did some unpopular things.
Oh yeah. Well, the most unpopular thing that they did, in my opinion, is when and this is why I call it a cult, because it wasn't a philosophical group, because they didn't leave any room for true advancement.
Hmm.
It was when some of the members started coming up with other ideologies and other concepts. They got murdered when the guys came up with. So they're supposed to be absolute numbers and this sort of thing, but you have negative numbers. These guys,
Right.
concept of negative numbers. Oh, they got murdered. Outright murdered.
Well, you got to keep it pure, Just
So,
keep the cult pure. Yeah, you were supposed to keep silent. They had like silence for like 20 years, or I forget how long, but it was like I remember the number 20 years before they would actually admit you to the deeper teachings. You had to work for the cult and be part of it. Yeah, their primary focus was a religious cult, I think, a mystery kind of thing, and
Matthew,
yeah,
some nerd figured out how to get a bunch of bored other nerds who are aimless, and I figured out how to make a cult. Yeah, essentially, in my opinion, it's not. It's happened before.
well, the ancient world was a lot more complicated than we think. They were operating on a lot of weird levels, cults and strange politics and stuff, and you
You
just
have to. You didn't have TV back then.
oh well, but I'm reminded of we have such a limited view sometimes, because we go along with what the books are saying. And I remember, I think it was in Herodotus, and I was reading about they were having like these wars in Greece, and I think it was like Athens decided, well, we're going to evacuate the city. So they said, and so they evacuated the whole city to over here. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then they mentioned again this other group of people. They very bravely evacuated the whole. And I'm thinking, wow, they took everyone in the city. But he finally mentions in one of these things, says, and of course they evacuated the city, of course, except for people too old, too poor, or too sick to go. They were left behind to be slaughtered. I was like, okay, this was a little more complicated than yes, we evacuated the whole city, but we don't mention those people because after all, they're not worth mentioning. After all, they didn't have any money and they were sick, useless slaves that weren't workable anymore. Toss them off the Tarpeian Rock or something. You don't want the useless slaves around. You got to feed them. Yeah, these weren't nice people by our standards. Not nice at all. Can you imagine that today if they had to evacuate somewhere? It's like, all right, everybody with an income of over $10,000, get on the bus. Not you. Sorry.
Well, don't
you can stay here and wait for the tidal wave. That's okay.
Don't you want your place in the vault? On top?
They have a nice place all set for you. Oh my goodness! It's 10 o'clock at night, gentlemen. I have to get going soon. This is late for me. Woo. How long are you guys going to be on? Because I got to go do some things, or maybe I'll stop back.
I don't know. Roger?
Roger has been abducted. They got him finally.
Roger fell asleep.
How
did I survive?
Oh, I had a weird thing happen.
I got an idea. You keep playing those female sound that make us think like Bob Dub's still around.
Bob Dub's always around in our heart.
I'm sorry, I just can't understand you under that incredibly thick British accent.
I heard some Star Trek sound effects earlier there. Good man. Oh. No, yeah, we could just take over the show without Roger here. Roger.
Roger's up.
It's the Mark Edwards show. We're going to talk about end user agreements.
Wait. Mark, I forgot you were even there.
Why not kill him now?
Holy crap. Dang.
I've just been listening, yeah.
Oh, shit.
Well, Gnosticism and computers don't really cross over too much, I don't think. But unless you start going into that whole Matrix thing, which is, I remember watching that movie, The Matrix, and I didn't watch it when it first came out. I never watch any movies that are new, but finally some friend, you gotta watch this, and I was over at his house like, all right. And I'm like, this is basic Gnosticism. The universe is an illusion, and you're being exploited by archons, and you have to free yourself from the illusion and get out of it, kind of deal.
Actually, Roger's in universe within the universe thing is a good analogy for that.
It is.
Yeah.
You are, you little oddball.
We use these analogies to try to understand the world around us, and at the end of the day, really just about people will adapt to just about any analogy you give them. I mean, if you raise people up to think a certain way, they're going to think a certain way. That's one of the problems we have with people that have grown up in abusive situations, because you come up with all these ideas and concepts. A lot of it, we talk about religion, and religion is religion as opposed to your personal religious experience. I forget who was it who said religion is a flight from a religious experience, because the religious experience is one thing and it's very personal. The religion is the social construct into which this is channeled. And it is usually a construct which is supportive of the society as a whole, because, for the ancients,
well, hold on.
Government, religion, society were all one thing. We didn't have this idea of a separation of church and state and society as three different things.
But you have to define religion.
Religion is the way you codify and express in words that which is basically an inexpressible experience. And it's a way to try to preserve something that is basically impossible to preserve. So in a certain sense, a religion is just an outward show. It never really touches the heart of the experience that the individual has. That's one way to look at it.
Well, that's fine. So something I'm very into. I know some Latin. I know my hobby, which I've not yet been able to get to, is etymology. However, I just do it naturally, and so I have to connect these words, these things. So it's sort of like when I was explaining to certain people who will remain nameless, who took over my little thing. So whenever I talk about government, I ask people, you know what government is? And usually the answer I get is no. Or usually sometimes I'll get some obscure
Right.
kind of definition that doesn't really explain. So it's like I have to tell them, it's Guvernare, as in governor, Guvernare, control, and then this mente, or mental, mind,
Right.
really means mind control. And so ever since I came across it, I started looking at other words than what they mean. So it's like I I have to like look at the etymology of things. So when we
Right.
talk about these concepts, we have to keep
Yeah,
them
well-
as short as possible.
You probably know then that the name the word religion, I believe, comes from the Latin religio, which means binding together. So it's like a
So
social
double meaning.
bond.
It's a double meaning. It is bondage
Right.
or one who bounds to. So
Right.
it could be a devotional thing. It could be a slavery.
Well, slavery is one-way bondage. I get the impression this is like a bond, like you have a bond with your family, which is arguably a kind of slavery, but everybody's each other's slave kind of deal.
Well, the term
That's
slave,
right.
the term slave is very interesting, and Mark always pulls this up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
People, yeah.
It's the robot then.
Okay.
Yeah, mine is the robot argument about the term robot originally meant slave or servitude.
Robotnik. Yeah. That came from Rurum's Universal Robots.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
was the play. It was a play originally in a story. I read it. It wasn't that great, but it did introduce a term, and that's interesting because one of the things I always pointed out was like robots were originally seen as slaves, basically workers, unpaid workers, right? And it always strikes me, if you watch the first Star Wars movie, Star Wars, the only one I really care for, the original 1977, whenever it was, and you remember the character of C-3PO, okay? He was a slave. He talked like a slave. And you think about the way he spoke, it was always this very slavish, and he spoke with this British accent. All right, so he says, "Oh, Master Luke, I don't know why he ran away. I told him he shouldn't dare leave such a good master like you." Now, give him a southern accent. "Lord, Master Luke, why I don't know why he run away like that. I told him he's got a really good man." I mean, if you just look at the words he's using, they're amazingly slavish. And
Okay,
this was,
I've always thought of it because with this accent, but more of a
Wait, hold on. You're speaking of
manservant,
Lord-
more
Lord
of a
Edwardy?
popular sort of. Well,
Yeah,
Lord
exactly.
Edworthy, are you telling me, Lord Edworthy, your house has never had any kind of slaves or serfs? Are you going to tell me that, Sir Lord
Lord
as far as
Edward.
I'm aware, none of
Earl
my
of
ancestors
Bevington
had any
Shire?
slaves, as far as I'm aware.
of course, the entire world served the Empire at one time.
Now,
There you go.
the thing though, you look at Star Wars and look exactly at what you're talking about right there. Now, whenever they escape, those little weird people with the funny eyes and the
Ewok. No, what were they? Ewoks?
no, they
No,
were like the pirate bandits of the desert.
Yeah. They had the giant sand crawlers. And they had the hoods. They
Right.
were there. Yeah.
I was going to say
They sold them
from
to-
the vault.
they sold them to Luke Skywalker though. Remember that?
Oh yeah, they were auctioned off right there.
Right.
And C-3PO he's always bumbling. He's never efficient because of